Doug's plans to have you laugh a little bit more. But anyway, I tried to prepare this speech this afternoon when Doug called me. Speaking is not just a little bit in the form of an icebreaker. Speaking is not really that difficult for me because when you teach, you get up in front of the class and you have to speak a lot. So it's not really a problem when you stand in front of a crowd and talk. Thanks very much for having me here tonight, and I think it's going to be I hope it's going to be a good speech, and I hope you enjoy it. So, at any rate, what I'd like to talk about tonight is effective dialogue. Effective dialogue can help you in many ways. It can help you when you're talking with others, when you're having a conversation over the internet. For example, you're having an argument with somebody about a particular political topic, or you're discussing some disagreement. It can help you in many ways that perhaps are not immediately evident. But tonight, I'd like to basically give you three bits of advice as to how, maybe you could call them out, these little bits of advice, attributes, as to how you can actually improve your dialogue or have better dialogue. So, first of all, what is dialogue? Okay. Dialogue basically consists of expressions, yes, or expressions and analysis. So what you have is somebody saying something, yes, a statement or a question or a comment, and somebody responding back to you, whether it's through another question or a comment, or sometimes not even responding. So what I'd like to talk about right now is what are the three attributes of good dialogue. So I'm going to give you a formula. The formula is LTR, and you can think of it as later. Just italicize the consonants in the word later, and you'll have L for listening, okay? T for thinking critically, and R whether to respond or not, okay? So let's talk a little bit about the first one. Listening is very important because if you don't understand from as many possible perspectives as possible, the other person's statement or question, you don't stand a very good chance of answering that question or statement properly. You could even leave a very bad impression. You could go off track, you could offend, you could come across as not very knowledgeable, etc. So in order to become more conversant with good dialogue, you have to learn to listen. Okay, so when you listen, then you start to think critically. You evaluate what you're hearing, and you're also thinking of, for example, in your analysis, prior knowledge. Okay, you have prior knowledge of what's being said to you, or you don't. So you have to factor that in. So do you have the facts of what the person is talking about, or don't you have the facts? Then you also have past experience with that topic or that question. So it might be a sensitive topic. It might be in which I'll come to in a second, an example that I'm going to talk about right now. That it could be a very sensitive topic like white privilege or some political discussion on the internet. Then, of course, you have bias. Everybody has bias, right? You hear something that's said at some or other time in the past. You've come across it, and you felt you either liked it, or you didn't like it, or you were indifferent. Yes? So, or you had some other opinion which you didn't have a chance to solidify before the current situation, where you're actually having a dialogue with whoever it is who made the statement or the comment. So, the last part of the dialogue is the response part. And you know, you can choose whether to respond in an appropriate or an inappropriate way. well, you don't want to respond inappropriately, and generally you'd like to have all the facts, but many times you don't have all the facts, so you have to think on the double, so to speak. So when you don't have the facts, it's really tricky to be able to come up with a good rejoinder or something like that. So let's do a little experiment here, because I think I spoke up plenty of time. I'm going to make a statement right now, and I'd like you just very quickly, within half a minute or a minute, write down what comes to your mind at the back of a piece of paper. The statement is this: the problem with socialism is that socialists eventually run out of other people's money. So let me repeat that. The problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money. You all know who said that, right? Margaret Thatcher. Okay. Yes? Okay. So what comes to your mind when you read that statement? Write down very quickly, half a minute. Anything, whether you're against it, for it, just one sentence. What's your response to that, if I had to tell you that? What are you going to tell me back in the dialogue? Could you let me know when that half a minute or minute is up, please?
Yeah, 20 seconds.
Okay. Okay, that's about time. Right. So let's analyze that statement. First of all, when it comes to myself, for example, I'm not really a capitalist. So that statement kind of niggles me a little bit, right? So I immediately think, well, what can I say back to the person who told me this? And when you're sitting on a computer, on the internet, you've got some time to decide how to put together a very nice sentence. In fact, I came up with two possible ways to answer this question. And if you've seen them on the internet, I put them on there, by the way. I'm just letting you know that that's the case. Okay, so my first response to that, to Margaret Thatcher's lovely quote, is that the problem with capitalism is that capitalists eventually run out of your money, okay? That's the first rejoinder. And it's a good rejoinder. It happens to be true, as far as I'm concerned. And then there's another rejoinder to that. You could say, instead of using the word capitalism, by flipping the sense in the sentence of socialists and other people's money, you can say, the problem with socialism is that the ruling socialists eventually start thinking like capitalists. Okay? It's also a good rejoinder. So it helps you in terms of dialogue whenever you're speaking to somebody to be able to put together words in such a way that show what you mean and what you'd like the other person to understand about your point of view. And it also helps you to become more confident when you speak, when you write, and when you're in an argument. And you want to be able to respond immediately with the correct answer. Okay, so now I'd like to give you another one as well, another very quick. So that example there was a statement. Now I'm going to give an example of a comment, a question, and then I'd like you to write down what comes to your mind first. So this question, very quickly, what came first, measure or number? What came first, measure or number? So in one or two sentences, write down now in half a minute or a minute. Please let me know when that half a minute or a minute is up.
Dollar.
Yeah. Not mine.
We got half a minute.
Okay. 10 more seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so with a question like that, you have to be very careful, because if you say, if number came first, why would there be a need to measure? On the other hand, if measurement came first, how could it be done without number? In other words, without the prior existence of number. So sometimes it's better not just to come out with an answer immediately, but to think of all the possibilities before you go ahead in the dialogue and give a response. So far we've looked at two examples. We looked at one which is a question, and we looked at another one which is a statement. The first one was a statement, and the second one was a question. The last one I'd like to give an example of is one where you're not necessarily going to give a response at all, because sometimes the best response is no response at all. Okay? And this is one where you've been told not to touch the cookies in the jar in the kitchen, right? But you desperately want a cookie. So I'm going into the kitchen, and Doug has told me, don't touch those cookies, right? So now I'm thinking, well, what if Doug catches me with my hand in the cookie jar? So, right, my hand's in the cookie jar and walk in the kitchen, and Doug sees me. What am I doing with my hand in the cookie jar? Tell me.
You're getting fingerprints on my cookies.
Pretty good. Okay, so best thing to do is not to say anything, because you take the cookie, you eat it innocently, and that's the end of it. I've answered his question. What am I doing with my hand in the cookie jar? I'm taking a cookie out, putting it in my mouth, eating it, and enjoying it. That's the best way to answer. You can think of that example in many different situations. You could be looking at something on the internet you're not supposed to be looking at, and your wife walks in. What are you doing? Just don't answer. Best response. Okay, so just to summarize these quick attributes of good dialogue. Listening, thinking critically.
I'm sorry.
I have a little bit more time. Listening, thinking critically, and responding or not. So under listening, you have to make sure that you understand everything that's being said. In other words, try to well define the concepts that are being talked about. Well define everything that's being said, in your mind at least, okay? Because if concepts are not well defined in your mind, you're not going to be able to respond properly. Thinking critically, that's a very vast subject, but really you have to evaluate what is being said very carefully. Try to leave your biases out, if possible. You won't be able to entirely, because you feel very strongly about certain subjects. So you will have bias. And then the last point is to respond or not. You can choose whether to give an appropriate response within context, or not within context, or basically not to respond. So later.